Chapter 14. Hunted.
To know.
Hiccup tried for the 7th time, tasting the word on his mouth. Below him, Toothless's ear sensor flapped.
I think it's do now.
No, I'm almost positive he said to nah,
Hiccup disputed.
No, do know?
The name of the large river they followed continued to escape him. Ever since a native of the land gave him a positive identification on the map, Hiccup had been trying to get his tongue to recreate the same sounds uttered to him. In his defense, it was a rather brief and confusing encounter. Hiccup all but shoved his map into the face of the last human they ran into, nearly 2 days prior, and continually pointed to the line of blue until the man understood what he was asking. There were no English words traded between them, no French or Norse. Just pointing and repeated words in their respective languages, followed by more pointing and raised voices. Through his travels, Hiccup gleaned at least one common factor among humans. No matter their origin, people universally shared the belief that speaking slower and louder would help him understand their language. It didn't.
He was probably calling you a jackass, Toothless professed. I bet it had nothing to do with the river.
Go shed yourself,
Hiccup returned with a phrase he learned from Toothless.
You don't even know what that means.
Do to, loser,
belly crawler,
bastard,
gimp,
wimp,
soppy-flamed worm,
son of a witch.
Bitch works too,
Hiccup pointed out.
Oh,
Toothless said before trying the word.
Bitch.
Soft-shelled hatchling,
simpleton,
dull scales,
babyface.
Hiccup's hands instantly went to his cheeks, patting the last of the baby fat he couldn't quite seem to shake.
Dinky winged air serpent?
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah, I went there. I'm not sorry.
Hiccup was unexpectedly jerked to the side, and he wasted no moment in thinking Toothless moved their bantering to a physical level. It was only through dumb luck and a blindingly bright sun that he managed to detect the same projectile that forced Toothless to dive in avoidance. They made a clean and quick evasion, allowing the thin, gleaming missile to bypass them at a good distance.
Was that an arrow?
Hiccup asked. He turned in his seat, trying to spot the projectile that had just whizzed by him. It happened so fast that he started to question if it actually did.
Watch it!
Snapping his attention forward, Hiccup helped Toothless swerve around a second arrow. It shot past them, disappearing into the sun behind their backs. Hiccup found this a remarkable feat, considering how high up they were, and acknowledged that the archer must have had impressive arm strength.
Where are they coming from?
He asked. No concern or apprehension strained his voice at being someone's target. The pair may have been exposed in open air, but they had speed, height, distance, and just about any other tactical advantage on their side. On the downside, everything below them was water or thick forests. There were no settlements on either side of the river, not any that could be seen through the congestion of the trees at any rate. It was the only reason that they decided to so brazenly fly that day. Conversely, a lack of settlements or clearings meant they didn't have a place to land. No landing site and arrows flying from the trees meant humans were nearby without any obvious pointers to their location.
We should get out of the sky, just to be safe,
Toothless stated, making the same observations.
There could be a whole army of them waiting down there.
Well, we can't land near wherever the arrows are coming from,
his rider replied.
Which makes it difficult to figure out where to land.
Then let's pick up some speed and lose them.
Sounds good to me,
Hiccup grinned. Speed always sounded good to him. They dove towards the lake at a side angle, plummeting so fast that Hiccup's eyes watered. He pressed his torso against Toothless's neck, stolen scarf wrapped around his neck, nose, and mouth to keep the rest of his face protected from the abusive air. Their path was not a straight one. Twists, spirals, and fake-outs kept them from falling victim to a well-timed arrow. Hiccup let Toothless take control of getting them out of harm's way, his foot reacting to the dragon's body language as he observed the shores for any people or clearings.
We should be good,
Hiccup said, sitting straighter to indicate they should slow down.
They couldn't have kept up with us, unless they were riding dragons too.
Toothless fanned his wings, easing off the speed.
Were we just hunted?
He asked, after a moment of taking in his new surroundings, which looked much like the portion of the river they just left. Hiccup laughed, playfully flicking one of the small sensors between Toothless's ears.
They probably thought you were a good-sized goose. You'd look good on a meal table.
Toothless responded by giving Hiccup a loving smack to the face by way of ear. I don't need to tell you where you'd look good.
In the belly of a dragon?
Hiccup blandly ventured, rubbing his eye. Among other places.
Hey, there's an island.
Hiccup abandoned his face in favor of needlessly pointing to the long, narrow strip of land rising from the middle of the river. Toothless, of course, had seen it, having sharper eyes. There were no bridges adjoining it to the mainland, and the thickness of the trees were uninterrupted by any visible structures. Think it's safe? He asked, despite all signs pointing to its uninhabited state. Hiccup shrugged.
I see nothing but trees.
That's what you said when we were being shot at, Toothless remarked, though he began descending towards one of the tapered ends anyway.
Well, our hunter couldn't be on there.
The arrows had flown from a different direction, and whomever they belonged to were far, far behind them by now.
That's a small comfort.
The pair made a clean landing at the edge of the landmass, and Hiccup hopped from the saddle onto stable soil.
Wow, this is nice,
Hiccup stated, admiring the lush greenery of the trees. Some were still budding, but others had full-blown foliage clinging to their branches. After a long, cold winter, he could always better appreciate a plant in full plumage. The weather still held the chill of early spring, but the farther south he traveled, the faster spring seemed to approach. Soon he wouldn't need the scarf to shield his face when flying. Toothless snorted and helped Hiccup remove the saddle and luggage by shrugging out of the shoulder stirrups. Doesn't look any different from the mainland. Hiccup swung the basket over his shoulder and began to walk into the tree line.
But I feel more secure here.
We don't know what is on the other side, Toothless pointed out, following the boy. From an aerial point of view, nothing could be spotted. But in foreign territory, where arrows fly at you from hidden locations in the trees, one could never be too cautious.
I'm in the mood for some fruit,
Hiccup decided out loud, seemingly ignoring Toothless's prudence. His eyes began to track his surroundings more shrewdly, on the hunt for certain fruit-bearing trees. Toothless snorted at the boy's one-track mind. His human could still multitask and was still an intellectual, but when it came to food these days, he developed tunnel vision. I still do not understand how you can eat that, the dragon intoned, sounding disgusted. It makes my stomach churn just thinking about that sickly taste. And the texture. Ugh. He had tried a bit of apple before, when he saw how Hiccup seemed to savor the taste. It would be the first and last time he ever attempted to devour a sweet plant.
I think they're delicious,
Hiccup sniffed.
It's not like I'll find any, anyway. It's probably too cold for any to grow. Still, I figured if we're this far south, we're bound to see something different.
Toothless scurried up a tree as Hiccup spoke and began branch-hopping overhead. The branches groaned and the leaves rustled, but everything was too springy and young to be shaken down. It's amazing humans aren't much larger than they are, considering how your kind seems to be able to eat anything which grows under the sun.
I think it's to feed our brains,
Hiccup guessed with honesty, comfortably ignoring Toothless's large shadow pass overhead.
It's not easy figuring out how to survive when the gods completely shortchanged you on physical attributes.
Well, you've done an annoyingly good job of it.
Why, thank you.
Points of white caught Hiccup's eye, and he focused his gaze on a group of shadowed, unobtrusive trees, much deeper from where he stood, but still visible. Even from the shadows, Hiccup could see the small white flowers sprouting from their offshoots. He grinned.
Hey, that looks like...
The breath was stolen from Hiccup's lungs as Toothless suddenly and roughly head-butted him to the ground. Hiccup winced as his thigh slid across pebbled and hard-rooted earth, tearing at his leggings and tunic. His basket had flown from his grip, landing feet away from him in the dirt.
Toothless, what the...
Hiccup's eyes, once searching for the troublesome dragon, fell across an arrow embedded on the ground, approximately where he used to be standing. Immediately realizing the situation, Hiccup scrambled to his feet at Toothless's backside. The dragon crouched before him, bent low in a spread-footed stance and growling at one of the trees. For a bated moment, where Hiccup practically waited for another arrow to fly, he could only discern Toothless's low growls from the loud silence. Not even the birds and insects dared to vocalize. Then a figure dropped from the tree Toothless had targeted, hitting the ground and then rising into a fighting stance all in the same quick motion. An arrow was poised within a strangely curved bow like none Hiccup had ever seen before, and aimed at the human rather than the dragon. The man wielding the weapon was garbed in even stranger clothes than the bow. A thick, long-sleeved robe, blue with gold embroidery, wrapped around the man with buttoning down the side. The slight bend at the knees parted the robe enough for Hiccup to catch sight of baggy pants tucked into plain leather boots. A belt more intricate than Hiccup knew possible encircled the man's waist, metals and jewels decorated the surface of the leather, chain straps hung down from various loops on the belt, each one containing metal-lidded pouches or weapons, as well as a long-handled, small-headed axe. A quiver for arrows lay at his right hip and a sheathed sword at his left. A right-handed warrior. An odd pointed hat lined with fur around the base topped off the foreign dress. Beneath the hat was thick, matted dark hair, several strands of which were braided and intertwined with metal rings. He sported a long-haired goatee with a mustache that stretched beyond a strong jaw. The man's face had a square element to it, with protruding cheekbones and tanned, weather-beaten skin stretching over the bone that caused Hiccup to place him in his 40s. A pair of dark brown, almost black, eyes, small and slanted, glared at him.
Sag mir, was du hier machst, oder du lernst die Pfeile der Magier kennen, the man growled.
His voice had a deep, gravelly character to it that mixed harshly with such a threatening tone. If possible, the man pulled back on the bowstring harder. Toothless growled and slammed a heavy paw on the ground. Hiccup read the dragon's body language as an inceptive attack.
"Toothless, don't,"
Hiccup ordered. He wasn't comfortable with having an arrow notched at his face, but he knew any sudden moves on his part would be a lot more forgivable than any on Toothless's. Hiccup was impressed the dragon hadn't been shot already, as he made for a terrifying sight. Apparently Toothless wasn't comfortable with the weapon aimed at Hiccup either.
"He fired at you,"
Toothless spat.
"Maybe it was just a warning shot,"
Hiccup tried weakly. His eyes flickered to the arrow sticking out of the dirt, the head of which was completely buried. The arrow that had only just missed him, thanks to Toothless's protection. Where would that have landed on him?
Wie bist du hierher gekommen?
The man snarled in sharp words.
Und was ist das für ein Monster? Fremde sind hier nicht willkommen.
Oh, shit. Hiccup swore softly, realizing whomever this was most likely didn't speak Norse. Not if he hadn't reacted to Hiccup speaking, anyway. He glanced at Toothless.
"How do you think we're going to get out of this one?"
"I take it negotiating isn't an option?" the dragon remarked snidely, also lost to the attacker's continued blathering. Toothless was not worried about himself. Perhaps the man would get off the single knocked arrow before Toothless took him down, but a single arrow could not kill the dragon, especially with his belly out of its firing range. However, a single arrow would kill Hiccup with his soft skin and two-legged posture that left all sorts of openings for disaster. The man had ceased his diatribe soon after Hiccup spoke casually to Toothless. He had a mildly interested look mixed in with his unwelcome guard. Hiccup took this as a sign that the man may be up for some charades and guesswork before things had to get violent. Unfortunately, Hiccup acquired a distaste for guesswork over the month.
"You don't speak Norse, do you?"
Hiccup asked rhetorically. He put his hands on his hips, preparing for another session of point and yell. He expected the man to say something slow and just as unintelligible as his earlier speech had been. Instead, Hiccup was granted the amusing sight of the stranger's eyes bulging in their sockets. The man pointed to the horn at Hiccup's hip with the tip of the primed arrow. He swallowed heavily and said in a much quieter voice than the one previously used,
"Wo hast du das her?"
Not knowing what was said, but understanding the blatant interest in the object, Hiccup put a protective hand on the horn. His grip unconsciously tightened when the man began to approach him in small, measured steps. Toothless increased his growls, but the man would not be deterred.
"This is mine,"
he started before realizing Norse wouldn't work. By habit, he switched to English.
"This is mine."
The man stopped his advance for a moment, perhaps digesting the switch in tongues.
"Where did you get that?"
He spoke, his voice still hushed. The hard, mistrustful look on his face remained. His eyes only flickered up to meet Hiccup's every once in a while, preferring to concentrate only on the horn.
"It was gifted to me,"
Hiccup returned, just as slowly. He felt odd that someone could speak English this far south. It was turning out to be the most useful thing he ever learned.
By whom?
Hiccup answered with a similar quick tone.
Mermaids.
Another moment passed where nobody moved.
Have May?
The man attempted, appearing completely lost.
Yes,
Hiccup realized he didn't know the English word for mermaids.
Fish, maiden.
Without realizing what he was doing, Hiccup had his hands cupped before his chest, making squeezing motions while he swayed his body from side to side. In spite of the situation, the man laughed. The lines around his face deepened, and yet it granted him a sense of youth. A change had rippled through his features, the caution rapidly receding, and a different, unnameable look passed over his dark eyes. Almost calculating.
Ah, I think you are speaking of Othello. Such a tale.
The man seemed tickled by the idea. He gestured towards Toothless with a nod of his head.
And your beast, is he not safe?
He is a dragon.
Hiccup, who felt remarkably safer himself after seeing the man crack a smile, stepped over Toothless's tail and placed a hand on the wide-scaled head.
His name is Toothless. No hurting you.
After saying this, Hiccup bent so far that his face was level to Toothless's.
Toothless, it's okay,
he murmured in Norse. The tension in Toothless's body did not lessen. Thin pupilled eyes never left the stranger when he replied.
He still has his weapon pointed at you.
Well, try making yourself look less threatening and maybe he'll move it,
Hiccup suggested, with more flippancy than he felt appropriate for the situation. Toothless heaved a sigh that Hiccup was sure the archer could detect.
This is one of your good faith hunches, isn't it?
The dragon deadpanned.
Yep,
Hiccup smiled. Toothless, indulging Hiccup once again, lowered himself to the ground in a resting position and made his eyes look as big and innocent as possible. He nearly lost his composure when, just as Hiccup predicted, the man lowered the arrow. He still had the bowstring wedged securely in the arrow's nock, and it would only take a second to pull it back into firing position, but it was a sight better than before. Toothless held off the impulse to start banging his head on the ground. It was situations like these that encouraged Hiccup's determination to trust everyone and everything.
I am Domokos.
The man introduced himself with a slight bow of the head.
Niak Domokos. This is my land.
Hiccup.
Hiccup pointed to himself.
Sorry, we wanted area to land.
Ixty, Domokos tried. That is all?
That is all,
Hiccup confirmed. He was a one-name man. Domokos' dark, shrewd eyes flickered between Hiccup and Toothless, often sweeping over the horn with barely concealed longing. At last he gave a short nod, seeming to have come to a decision.
If you and your friend, Dunlaus, promise to behave yourself, I will allow you as guests.
Hiccup brightened at the thought of being a guest. He could be sleeping in a bed for the first time in months. It had been so long since he resided in a human structure, too afraid of being separated from Toothless. But if he and Toothless were welcome...
Sounds very nice, but you must promise to not harm Toothless,
he said as a condition.
Very well,
Domokos agreed. He pulled the arrow from the bow and returned it to the quiver at his side, the final sign of a truce.
You can tell me how you came across that horn as we feast.
Domokos, as it turned out, was quite a warm and genial character when unarmed, and Magyar, and an expert archer, horse rider, tracker.
Truly, you struck and then ran,
the man roared with laughter, slapping his knee.
It's true. My thinking was that there are too many guards to hit again.
Hiccup grinned. In the time Hiccup had been brought to a camouflage tent, a yurt, Domokos called it, and had a small drink called palinka shoved in his hand, which proved quite tastier than gilly ale, Domokos had transformed from a hardened warrior into an easygoing and sociable host. In a lot of ways, he reminded Hiccup of some of the regulars at Burke's Meat Hall. The yurt was circular, with a tall conical roof leading to a smoke hole in the center. The height of the tent was just enough to remain covered by the encompassing treetops, the brown and moss colors of the soft canvas aiding to its concealment, which explained why neither human nor dragon detected it from above. Rugs and tables and racks for hats and cloaks decorated the interior, all with similar embroidery to Domokos' garb and elegantly carved birds of prey on the woodwork. Weapons, Bows and curved swords and shields, new and used, were strewn and propped about. Currently, the smoke hole was unused. Domokos insisted that they only enjoy the warmth of a fire when the sky darkened enough to cloak smoke. If Hiccup hadn't wondered before if this was some sort of hideaway, then he certainly wondered now. Toothless was curled up on a particularly comfy-looking rug, content to let Hiccup make a new human friend, and looking for all the world like a large, scaly cat.
"One day I will go back and hit him again,"
Hiccup assured him. He only had one of the little drinks and had taken his time sipping it as Domokos had, but he could tell the alcohol content must have been high. He felt warm all over, and he had taken his cloak and scarf off a while ago. Domokos refilled Hiccup's glass, still shaking with laughter. Nodding, Hiccup brought it to his nose, mimicking Domokos again, and inhaled, scenting the light fruity aroma of pears.
"You are a very, very interesting man," the archer granted the youth. "I truly did not expect such stories from you. I would have thought them lies had I not met Thanos myself."
Toothless flicked an ear in acknowledgement. Hiccup smiled fondly at the dragon and took another small sip of the palinka.
"I find myself having to believe about the cello as well," Domokos continued.
The smile remained on his face, but his eyes once again focused on the horn Hiccup had not felt safe enough to take off his person. The former hooligan recognized the immense interest the man held for the object from the start. Even in the face of a night fury, Domokos seemed more concerned with Hiccup's acquirement of the instrument than his own safety. Though it may have helped that Domokos wasn't a Viking, and therefore wasn't raised to seek and destroy every dragon at hand.
"Why are you so interested in this horn?"
Hiccup asked. He hoped it wasn't a good reason. He really liked the horn.
"It belonged to my great-great-grandfather, and his father before him, and his father before him,"
Domokos answered, sounding whimsical and nostalgic as he swirled his palinka in his glass. Hiccup almost winced. Lineage was usually a good reason for interest. Domokos continued.
"It was stolen from our clan very long ago, but we were told stories from the time we were children. Stories of the Eastern's eagle that may never be harmed, the heroic and generous lion that chose the nobles himself."
Now Hiccup felt bad. He knew there had to be some truth to Domokos' claims simply because of the sheer amount of interest in a seemingly ordinary instrument. And the man knew of the symbols on it without having to inspect it. Hiccup opened his mouth, intending to explain the horn's meaning to him, when Toothless sprang from the floor. Both humans' attention switched to the dragon, who now faced the doorway with his back arched. Black spiked fins rose over the hills of Toothless's spine like hackles.
"Toothless?" Hiccup switched to Norse. "What's wrong?"
"Is he sensing something?"
Domokos asked his guest, not particularly expecting an answer. The man had a hand on the curved hilt of his sword. "There's something that smells wet and rank." An odd scuffling sounded from outside, with a grating noise overlapping it, short, high-pitched, relentless. And then a creature burst through the door, loud and irritating with incessant yipping, and skidded to a stop directly in front of the dragon. Toothless bent low, chin to the floor, and growled back at the beast. Hiccup couldn't blame his friend for the hostile reaction. The animal was nearly unrecognizable as anything he knew of. Its coat of hair consisted of nothing but long, black dreadlocks, topped with a mushroom of dreads for a head. Just a muzzle was visible through the layers of thick, ropey hair, pulled into a snarl at a creature several times its size. "What is it? What is it?" Toothless repeated hysterically. He looked ready to chomp the little beast in half. Hiccup hurried in front of the Night Fury with hands held before his nose.
"It's a dog. Don't eat it."
Judging by Domokos' amused expression, it was his dog. Hiccup did not need Toothless eating his host's dog. "Make it stop," Toothless demanded, trying to maneuver away from the shield of hands Hiccup had created. "Why is it doing that?" The dog altered between snarling and barking. It would back up, wiggling side to side as a low string of growls carried from its throat, and then hop forward with a series of high-pitched yips.
"It's threatened by you,"
Hiccup explained. He could feel a point in his temple starting to pulse, and he rubbed it with 2 fingers. "Well, I'm threatened by it. It's hideous. Its fur makes less sense than the humans." Hiccup may have been offended if he hadn't been momentarily enthralled with Toothless, admitting he was threatened by something as domesticated as a dog.
"And you call me dramatic,"
Hiccup muttered. Toothless hissed at Hiccup's detachment in the face of such a monstrosity.
"You can't even see its eyes,"
Toothless stressed.
"Does it have any?"
"Yes, it has eyes," Hiccup laughed. He turned to Domokos.
He has eyes, yes?"
With a wide grin, Domokos strode forward and hugged the dog to him with one muscled arm. The dog calmed some, but still continued his steady growl in the face of the dragon. He pulled the hair back to reveal a dog's face, embedded with angry blue eyes.
"Is that the problem?"
Domokos asked. He regarded Toothless with far less reservation than before, perhaps feeling endeared by the silly reaction.
"This is Tardos,"
he introduced the dog, who still squirmed every now and then in Domokos' grip.
"It translates to bald."
Hiccup grinned wildly at the humor, aided by the hilarity of Toothless's antics.
"Nukos, Tardos, nukos."
Domokos soothed the dog. After a few good rubs to the dog's breast, Tardos finally calmed down enough to settle against the lattice-framed wall. Toothless, likewise, moved as far away as possible from the canine.
"I'm watching you, creature from the abyss,"
Toothless directed at the dog. Tardos barked.
"Domokos?"
A new, unfamiliar voice called from somewhere outside the yurt.
"Warum ist Tardos da aufgeregt?"
"Oh, this should be very interesting."
Domokos sighed and sent Hiccup a helpless look.
"Who is that?"
Hiccup asked. He kept his eyes on the door, hearing the crunching of leaves under boots grow louder.
"Salt,"
Domokos replied.
"He is not one in favor of much change."
Hiccup understood this as not liking visitors, just as a man ducked under the wooden doorframe. He had a very similarly styled outfit to Domokos, but with a red and green color scheme. The addition of a short leather vest, decorated with several metal buttons, drew attention to the man's tall, lean frame. Hiccup realized this Salt couldn't have been older than 25, with skin fairer and smoother than Domokos and a longer, leaner face, but still displaying the prominent cheekbones that seemed to be so common in these parts. His hair was colored a lighter brown than his elder, long and plaited with comparable metal-ringed dressings. The eyes were only slightly bigger compared to the other Magyar, but narrowed so that the hazel irises could barely be seen as Salt zeroed in on the stranger standing next to Domokos. Salt didn't even wait for an explanation. His hands immediately went to his head, subsequently drawing Hiccup's attention to the large bow hung over his shoulder, and gripped his hair.
"Domokos!"
Salt barked.
"Du hast einen Fremden auf die Insel gelassen."
"Immer mit der Ruhe, Salt."
Domokos placated with a warning timbre. Salt shook his head, content to keep up his tirade.
"Woher willst du wissen, dass nicht dem König dient?"
"Salt."
"Du setzt dir einfach unsere aller Sicherheit aufs Spiel. Warte nur, bis die anderen davon hören."
The words flew from the man's mouth at such a rapid pace that Hiccup wasn't sure if he was speaking an actual language or making a jumble of noise in anger and hand motions. He decided to keep back and let Domokos handle this. Instead, he took another sip from his drink.
"Salt!"
Domokos snapped, silencing the young man at once.
"Guck dir den doch mal an. Der ist nicht von hier. Nicht mal aus den Nachbarländern. Der hat doch keine Ahnung, was hier abgeht."
Hiccup did not know what Domokos said, but it kept Salt from immediately replying. Instead, the young man cast Hiccup a contemptuous look, his eyes sliding over the ratted clothes and wild hair of the stranger. Hiccup got the distinct impression that he was found wanting. Salt opened his mouth at long last, probably intent on delivering a less than flattering report, when Domokos held up a rough, padded hand.
"We will speak English now, for the benefit of our guest,"
Domokos stated. His tone left no room for argument.
"Very well,"
Salt muttered, with so much moodiness that it was a miracle he managed to keep from pouting. He pointed a gloved finger at Hiccup's face, aimed right between his eyes so that Hiccup would know he was being addressed.
"We do not need any more. We have no horses left for you."
Hiccup had no idea what Salt was talking about.
"As you can see," Domokos joyfully interjected, "our guest is no rider of horses."
And he swept his hand to present the third member of the party. For the first time, Salt's eyes were drawn to Toothless, who had been sulking against the tent wall and staring at the man flatly. Salt yelped and jumped back. Hiccup concealed his chuckle with a cough, while Domokos outright laughed.
"Jumpy idiot,"
Toothless snorted.
Demon! But den göttern, han monster direkt oss till hölle.
Salt obviously had some less than flattering things to say about Toothless as well, and he grappled for one of the shields leaning against the yurt.
Nothing of the sort,
Domokos said easily to whatever Salt had exclaimed. He strode forward and gripped Salt's forearm firmly.
Come, my friend. This is 60 and Dunlaus. They are from the far north, farther than our problems here. They are friends.
Hiccup gave a cheesy wave. Toothless continued his impassive stare. Salt wrenched his arm away from Domokos, keeping narrowed eyes on the pair of newcomers, but mostly on Toothless. Hiccup watched the still heavy-breathing Magyar lower himself to the ground, thinking Salt was simply trying to avoid fainting. But the man ended up grabbing the corner of a silver-tasseled rug and yanked it up, revealing a wooden trapdoor embedded in the dirt. He pulled it open and swung his feet into the dark hole.
"I am going to retire,"
Salt announced, descending in a manner that suggested stairs supported his body.
"And when I return, they will both be gone."
The floor door slammed shut over his head. Domokos sighed, walking to the folded rug and kicking it back over the door.
"I apologize for him. He is filled with suspicion for one so young."
"Why couldn't he have taken the dog?" Toothless remarked at almost the same time. Hiccup glanced at Tardos, who had taken the wall on the other side of the yurt to Toothless. The pair of quadrupeds had been faced off the entire time.
"It's fine,"
Hiccup answered absently, staring in amusement at the rug.
Where does that lead, if I may ask?"
Domokos smoothed wrinkles from the rug with his foot as he answered.
"That is our sleeping quarters, and hiding quarters for when we need to be hidden. This land lost its security long ago."
"Yes, I collected from conversations that your people are in a time of distress."
Domokos nodded, crossing his arms.
"The new king is meaning to westernize our people. They are trying to force the new religion on us, trying to erase our ways, our traditions. There are many of us who oppose this, but acting on such thoughts leads to death. The king will annihilate any who try to cling to our ways. He believes we will hold them back from moving forward."
Through his explanation, Domokos' face grew more and more aggrieved until the playful man of before had all but disappeared.
"You cannot live in peace in your own land,"
Hiccup stated for him. He knew what that felt like.
"I am sorry."
Domokos nodded in acceptance.
"We will get through it," he declared. "Eventually."
Hiccup recalled something else Salt mentioned.
"And you have horses on the island?"
Ones that would not be shared, apparently. This brought a small smile to Domokos' face.
"Egan. We take them here from time to time, but they live on one of our camps on the mainland. They are trained to swim across when we call, and swim back as I ride to the mainland. They are our greatest allies in these times."
Hiccup's eyes grew wide.
"Horses can do that?"
Hiccup had spent his life on an island straight out of hell. They didn't let their horses swim in the ocean where the water was rough and freezing. Well, not back when they had them anyway. It was hard to keep horses when they turned out to be a favorite snack for giant, dragon-controlling demons. But to use horses as a means of traveling across rivers was clever and undetectable, and
"I would like to trade you for that horn,"
Domokos stated frankly, cutting across all small talk. Startled at the turn of conversation, Hiccup immediately drew the horn to his body, his fingers tracing the beautiful ivory carving. He knew this was coming, ever since Domokos first lowered his weapon in favor of getting closer to it, but he couldn't seem to bring himself to part with it. It wasn't that Hiccup needed a horn, and he knew it embodied much sentimental value to Domokos, but mermaids gave it to him. They had to have given it to him for a reason, right? Gudrid had even insinuated that he needed to figure out how to find the sisters. His word were assigned to him by the gods themselves, so there must have been a purpose for it coming to his possession. Domokos frowned, noticing the boy's hesitance.
"I have many valuable items. Things of gold and precious metals. Things that would buy a new life in some lands,"
Domokos tried to sell.
"I travel light,"
Hiccup pointed out.
"I have no plans of settling in a new land, and I do not mean to sound difficult, but I am thinking that I have this horn for a special reason. A
destiny?" Domokos filled in with a guess. Hiccup nodded. He didn't know the exact translation, but it sounded familiar. And it may have worked, for it had the Magyar thinking, a thumb and forefinger repeatedly threaded through the long mustache, as though coaxing along an idea.
"Are you any good with a weapon?" Domokos prompted after a moment.
I'm fair with a knife.
Hiccup shrugged, gesturing to the dagger in his belt. Compared to Domokos' heavy get-up of weaponry, Hiccup felt pretty insignificant. More than fair, Toothless put in, knowing Domokos couldn't understand him. The dragon was still engaged in a staring contest with Tardos. Neither seemed inclined to surrender.
"A sword? An axe? A bow?" Domokos continued to prod. "Anything else?"
Hiccup shook his head. The dagger was all he really had going for him.
I am more of a talker than a fighter.
Hiccup paused for a moment and shook his head.
No, I ride. I'm a rider, not a fighter.
That sounded much more accurate to him. Domokos sat back on his heels, once more regarding the boy in front of him. Rather than looking put out, he seemed encouraged.
"You feel you were given that horn for a reason, were you not?" Domokos asked.
At Hiccup's confirming nod, he continued,
"But you do not understand the importance of said horn to my people. You do not know its meaning to us in these times."
Guilt settled like lead in Hiccup's stomach. Even after trespassing on this land, this man had still offered him hospitality, and Hiccup continued to hold onto this treasure for reasons he couldn't explain.
I am sorry,
Domokos held up a hand, much as he had with Salt, and Hiccup felt compelled to stop talking.
"I understand. But what if I traded one key to your destiny for another? I think I know how to make this a fair trade for you and your beliefs. I will give you something that will have as much meaning and even more usefulness. Something weightless, something that will allow you to travel."
Hiccup was almost afraid to ask.
How is that?
"You are a rider,"
Domokos stated, as though it were the greatest honor in the world.
"But you do not know how to fight like a mounted one. Yet.